This happened to me this morning. I've had a lot of trouble sleeping recently, so a lot of the time, if it gets to 8 and 9 in the morning, I'll stop trying and go get some other stuff done early. Last night was one of those nights, so I decided to take my dogs for a short early walk in the park beside my house. I'm never afraid of walking at night because I'm pretty tall and I live in a quiet suburb, so the fact that it was dark didn't worry me. I head out with my dogs and into the park, which is partially lit by lamps but still quite dark. When I was a kid, there was just one stretch of unlit pathway that used to scare me in the dark. So when I'm walking there, I'm more aware of my surroundings because of that. As we start walking along that bit of path, one of my dogs, Alfie, turns around and starts barking. I turn around also, and then I notice a man jogging behind me. As he gets to about 10 feet behind, he just stops immediately, then starts walking toward me. I've got mild alarm bells already, but I keep calm and nod to him as he walks past me. I couldn't make out his features much, but I did notice that he was staring directly at me, keeping eye contact as he passed me by. I said a short, "How are you?" as he passes, but he just stays completely silent. As soon as he's about 10 feet past me, he starts jogging again, down towards a part of the path lined by trees. I'm properly spooked now, so I take out my phone and send a voice message to my group WhatsApp, explaining to them what just happened. I'm just done explaining this when I hear a noise and turn around. The guy is jogging up behind me again. To give some context, there's only one path, and he was in front of me. In order to get behind me without me seeing him, he would have had to run to the area under the trees, turn around, creep past me, across the grass quietly, and then come back up the path behind me. I turn around and watch him come up to me, stop jogging, and walk past. I say the same short sentence again, and then he jogs off. I decide I'm going back to my house, but the little laneway that leads to my road is up ahead, which means I have to keep walking the same way. I get about 50 meters up that stretch of path, in between the lampposts, when Alfie starts making grumbling and pre-bark noises again. I look up, and there he is ahead of me, just standing beneath one of the orange lights, looking in my direction. My heart is thumping, but I know I'm definitely going to keep facing that direction. There was no way I was turning around. I had seen another guy just riding his bike around the park, and there are houses that connect to it, so I'm not completely isolated. And I've also got a big dog. The laneway to my road is just past him, so I let my dogs pull me up the path, so to speak. And as soon as we get to him, Alfie tried to move toward him. This causes him to move and shift position. I pull Alfie away and start talking to the dog, saying, "Okay guys, let's go home. Come on, this way." And I don't stop talking until we get out of the park, feeling my back completely exposed the whole time. My house is just across from the laneway, so I make my way really quickly towards the gate. Just as I'm about to put in the code, a loud sound like a bin falling over comes from behind me, from the other row of houses, the ones that back onto the park. I spin around to look at my neighbors in case one of them had opened their door to go to work, but nobody. I put the code into the gate quickly and make it inside as fast as possible. I went to my room and fell straight asleep, and I'm never walking in that park alone at night again. That guy was the biggest creep, and I hope I never run into him again. This happened 4 years ago when I was 19. I met a nice lady one day at the dog park, and her name was Steph. She was 38 years old at the time, and she had one of those dogs that looked like a border collie, but small. I don't remember the breed's name, but my dog is a funny mix of a miniature dachshund and a pit bull. We exchanged numbers so that we could meet up with the dog sometimes, since the two hit it off. One day I was home alone, and I thought that my mom was at work. The lady I met at the park calls me at about 9 p.m. and asks if I wanted to take a walk with the dogs, and I said yes. After an hour of walking and talking, it was time to go home, so she tells me she can walk me to the door. As we stand some meters from my building, she started to say her goodbyes. I honestly wasn't listening much because I was focused on a strange man that was standing behind her in front of my building door. My first thought was that the man maybe was one of the neighbors that I didn't have a chance to meet yet. Maybe he had forgot his keys and wanted to get in with me. I had just moved there about 2 months ago. Then I remembered that the back door of the building was open since the lock was broken. My building has 2 doors, one in the front and one in the back. All neighbors in the building knew this because we all got a paper from the property owners saying that they would fix the lock, but whoever was breaking the lock with stones had to stop, and that if anybody knew who it was, we would have to report the person. At the time, I had some disorderly neighbors whose kid had lost their keys, so they would constantly break the door's lock. Also, it's common sense to know if a door is working in the building you are living at, so I knew the man wasn't one of my neighbors since he could just get inside from the back. My second thought was maybe that he had rang someone's doorbell, but I didn't see him press any buttons, and I didn't hear anybody answer any call. At this point, Steph sees that I'm focusing on something behind her, so she looks back and sees the man. I tell her that the guy gives me a bad vibe and I don't want to enter when he is standing there, so I asked her if she could follow me to the back door, and she said yes. Now, this is a 5-minute walk since there are a lot of buildings attached to one another. Small tunnels are built between the buildings so people can pass to the back side faster. So we start to walk, but at the side we are walking, there is no tunnel, so we had to go around all the buildings to get to the back of mine. As we passed the guy and continued walking, he started to follow us and was walking 2 meters behind us. Now that he was closer, I could see him better. He seemed around 40, with all of his clothes being black, with his hoodie on his head. He was looking slightly down, so it was hard to see his face. He was also walking with one hand inside his jacket like he was holding and hiding something, maybe a knife. I told Steph that the guy was following us, so she told me that we should stop walking and let him pass us by. So we were standing there under a pole light. Nobody was around. The streets were dead, and it was very dark outside. It was winter. The guy kept walking towards us and past us by a few centimeters, and then stops and turns around to face us, still looking slightly down. The dog started to get agitated, and Steph suddenly yelled, "What do you want?" But the man didn't answer. He was just standing there in silence, facing us, still with one hand inside of his jacket. I told Steph that we should turn around and walk the other way. This way had a tunnel that you could pass through, so we started walking the opposite direction and the guy started following us again. I knew that if I passed through the tunnel, this guy would still follow us to the other side, so we kept walking, but all of a sudden the guy stops following us and we lose him. Great, I thought. We walked back with the dogs for 10 more minutes and I hoped the guy wouldn't be there when we got back. But I was wrong. As we are returning from the backside, I see the guy from a distance. He was standing in the middle of the tunnel, and he sees me returning. At that point, I was very scared and started to panic. This guy knew where I lived, and he knew that I would come back. He was standing in the middle of the tunnel, obviously, to see which direction I was returning from, and he obviously wanted something with me. For a second, I thought of making a run for it, but then I remembered the back door didn't lock, so if this guy wanted to run after me, he could easily enter behind me and get me before I could open the door to my apartment. Instead, I called my mom on the phone, like a little kid. Steph told me we could go to her building some streets down. While we were walking and I'm telling my mom what was happening, she was obviously worried. Luckily, she was at her ex-boyfriend's house that lived relatively close to us, so she tells me to wait with Steph and that she would pick me up. So I'm just standing with Steph outside of her building, and after about 10 minutes, I see my mom coming down the street. I thank Steph for everything, and my mom and I started walking up the street back to our home. As we were approaching our street, I don't see the guy anywhere. My theory is that if he started to follow us again, he might have seen me on the phone and thinking that I was calling the cops, so he left. I still don't know what his intentions were, but I have a sense that they were bad. I have now been living in the same building for 4 years, and I haven't seen him since, and I really hope I never do. This story happened about 2 years ago when I was 19 and my foster sister, Kira, was 16. For the sake of this story, it's important to know that I was female presenting and I hadn't come out as trans yet, nor was I presenting myself in an overly masculine style at the time. It was the summer before I was going to college and I mostly lived with my mom and Kira, except for every other weekend where I'd stay with my dad. Now, summers where I am can get really hot and humid, so we had a habit of waiting to walk the dogs until 6 or 7 p.m. because that's when it would be a lot cooler, but still just enough light outside. On this particular evening, Mom wasn't going to be home until late, though I don't remember the exact reason why. She's a woman that likes to stay busy and often participates in choirs, Bible studies, youth group events, classes, and more. So it wasn't uncommon for Kira and I to be left home alone until 8 or 9 p.m. So it was up to me and Kira to walk the dogs by ourselves, unless we wanted our younger dog, Samson, to throw tantrums due to the pent-up energy. Even though we lived in the countryside and could have walked him down our street, Kira and I decided to drive out 20 minutes to a park instead. Why, you ask? I don't really remember. It could have been anything from being bored walking our roads to not wanting to have to deal with blind curves and hills. Whatever the reason, at around 7:30 p.m., Kira and I harnessed our 2 dogs, packed them up in our car, and drove to the park. Let me explain the layout of the park so that it's easier to understand why we got nervous halfway through our walk. This park isn't very big, but it's popular because of its loop. The entire park is surrounded by a mile-long looping road with its attractions, like playgrounds, ponds, and a small country hall, spaced about in the inner side of the loop. The outer side is just grass, trees, and one playground at its end. Thus, it's common and expected to pass people walking the loop at least 2 times if you're walking in opposite directions. But not if you're walking in the same direction, obviously. Any cars on this road can only drive in one direction because it's a one-way road. At first, everything about this walk was normal. I parked the car and we clipped our dogs to our leashes, and we started on the loop. Every so often, we would stop so I could take pictures of our dogs, particularly of Kira trying to wrangle Samson, who likes to pull like his life depends on it and weaves around because he wants to smell everything. It was while I was taking one of these pictures that the first encounter happened. A man who looked to be in his 40s walked past us, walking the same direction as we were, up towards the playground on the outer side of the loop. He smiled at Kira, nodded, and said, "Hello," or "cute dogs," or something like that, and just kept walking. I honestly didn't think anything of it. We were at a park at a time of day where it's common to walk around due to the cooler temperature, and people where I am are generally friendly. Smiling and saying hi is pretty normal, no matter who says it. We smiled back, maybe said hi or thanks, depending on what he said, and that was that, or so we thought. This man passed us again only 10 minutes later, directly across from where we'd seen him previously. Just like he did before, he smiled and said, "Hi." This time, Kira and I looked at each other once he was ahead of us and shared, "Well, that was weird," expression. Just 10 minutes earlier, he had passed us walking up towards the playground and subsequently broke off from the loop, and he'd been walking in the same direction as us. This time, though, he'd cut in front of us, and he did it in a way where we had to stop to avoid running into him. Hell, he nearly touched Kira with how close he was walking. That was already weird in and of itself. The other weird part was him cutting past us in the opposite direction. The only way he could have done that is if he cut across the inside of the loop, since it would have been close to impossible to pass us at our certain point from the other direction if he decided to walk the opposite way of the loop than us. It came off almost like he wanted to walk by us again. But just like before, Kira and I brushed this weirdness off. The guy could have been enjoying a rambling stroll and doing his own thing for all we knew. Besides, we had 2 reasonably sized dogs with us who'd mess with us. Not even 5 minutes later, the same man passed us again. Once again, cutting so close past us that he nearly brushed shoulders with Kira. Again, he smiled and said hi before walking off. This was officially the moment I decided that we needed to leave. Sure, it's normal to pass a person at least 2 times walking this loop if you're going in opposite directions, but doing so takes a while. You have to at least get to the parallel spot on the loop from where your paths first intersected to see each other again. Both the time between running into the guy in this location and the location we passed each other didn't match up in a way that didn't look suspicious. Plus, I wasn't really a fan of how he cut across us. The first time, he passed us like a normal person, walking faster than us would, albeit a little close. The second time, he cut in front of us from the opposite direction instead of walking around us to the point we had to stop to avoid running into him. And this third time, he walked up behind us, then did this weird directionally slant walk to cross the street and go in the opposite direction, cutting us off again. So yeah, I told Kira to hustle so that we could get to our car and get out instead of doing a second loop. So that's what we did. When we were almost to our car, we noticed a car creeping along behind us. We pulled to the side and stopped to let it pass, but for a second, it stopped too. We figured that he was getting ready to park, so we started walking again. The car started creeping along behind us soon after we did. So we stopped again, and the car stopped with us. This was when Kira got nervous. We hadn't seen the middle-aged guy since the third cutoff, so we figured I overthought the whole thing. But here we were, with this tinted windowed car acting weird as hell. Was it the same guy back with his car? Or a different guy? We couldn't tell. Before anything could happen though, another car idled up to the one next to us, and whoever it was sped up to the expected 5 miles per hour. We got to our car pretty fast after that and practically picked up the dogs to let them inside of it. We got in and got out of there. My mistake, however, was neglecting my rear view mirror and the well-advised rule not to drive straight home if you're worried a stranger's taken too much interest in you. I was anxious, dumb, and primarily concerned with getting home where we could be safe. Because home is safe, right? Nothing bad is supposed to happen to you there, right? My naive false sense of security. I think we got home around 8 something. The sun had finally disappeared behind the horizon, but it wasn't fully dark yet. Just that dusty purple color the sky gets before it finally accepts that it's nighttime. Mom wasn't home yet, so we got the dogs some water, locked the doors, ate a late dinner, and chilled in the living room, talking about things that didn't really matter. It was almost 9:30 when the scariest part of this whole ordeal happened. There, Kira and I were sitting on different couches, talking about something non-related, when we noticed the ceiling briefly light up over where Kira was sitting. An important note here is that Kira was sitting on a small couch with her back to a window that faces the front of the house, while I was on a couch on the opposite wall where I could see a sliver of our front porch. Likewise, right next to Kira was our front door, which has 3 small rectangular windows on it. Due to our long, slightly curvy driveway, it's common to see headlights stream through that window that light up the ceiling, fade, then intensify. It obviously means that someone just come home. Assuming that Mom was finally coming back from wherever she went that night, and we didn't take any notice of the light skipping the final arc of someone pulling all the way up the driveway either. We also didn't pay any mind to how long it was taking Mom to come inside. Mom has a habit of pulling in and then checking her phone for God knows how long before coming inside. After a couple of minutes, I noticed a small motion sensor light Mom set up on a table on the porch light up. Again, I could only see a sliver of space based on my position in the curtains. Basically, I could see a smidge of the table and the rails bordering our porch, but not its stairs or anything approaching the door, depending on how they approach it. I wasn't paying much attention either because I assumed it was my mom. Right after the light went off, we both heard the door storm open, but we didn't hear anyone pressing the code keys of our lock or jiggling the door handle like Mom usually does right away. The moment the storm door creaked open, our 2 dogs jumped up and ran to the door, barking like madmen. Our golden/greyhound mix, Calvin, has a deep scary bark which contradicts his adorable appearance. Samson, our dumb goofball son, who is incapable of hurting a fly, but a big boy, jumps up on his hind legs and scrabbles on one of the small windows in a desperate attempt to see who is outside. Immediately, the storm door slammed shut, and we heard heavy footsteps on the cement of our porch. Calvin started going nuts and jumped up on Kira's couch, standing on its back instead of the cushions to look out the window. Samson ran out of the room and went out of the doggy door that leads to the back porch, which has a ramp going down in a fenced-off portion of our yard. I couldn't move. I had never understood, really, what it meant when people described their limbs turning to lead until that moment. It felt like I didn't even have limbs, really. Like moving wasn't an option. If I moved, I might glimpse something or someone through the windows. The person could see me running around the house, freaking out, and decide to come after us after all. So I sat there, with my mind steadily going blank as my heart sped up, and limbs refused to move. In a game of fight, flight, or freeze, I am the freezer. Kira, on the other hand, is a fighter. She spins around and looks out the window, but can't see anything because besides the motion light on the porch, it's just way too dark. So naturally, she gets up, grabs a stray dog toy, which just so happens to be a tug-of-war rope with a ball in the end, and opens the door. I tell her, very calmly, to shut the door and to stay inside. She ignored my wishes and stepped out onto the porch. She comes back inside after not seeing anything, but to my utter disbelief, she disappears to the kitchen, comes back with a knife, and goes outside again. This time she's gone for a handful of seconds before running back inside and slamming the door shut. Breathless, she tells me that she went out for a bit into the yard and saw the outline of a man by the run-down dog kennel that we don't use anymore. When she saw him and froze, he moved. This time she listened to me when I told her to lock the door. I managed to calm Mom despite my head being empty and my limbs being lead, and she convinced me to get up and to make sure all the doors were locked, including the basement, and making sure the dogs were inside. I ended up making Kira go into the fenced-up section to drag Samson back inside, because I couldn't get my legs to move after thinking about doing it myself. Cowardly, I know. After Mom got home and looked around, finding nothing, we called the non-emergency number for the police, not wanting to bother them in case we were overreacting. 2 cops came by and walked around our yard and found nothing. We got the sense they didn't believe us, but instead saw us as 2 overexcited girls with exaggerated imaginations. But still, they humored us and told us, after we told them about the park, that if we think anyone might be following us or if someone is acting a little too creepy, not to drive straight home and to check if anyone was following us. Then they left. To this day, I'm pretty sure the only people who believe someone with malicious intent came to our home in hopes of finding 2 teenage girls is Kira and me. Though whether or not whoever it was, the guy from the park, we're not sure. But it's too coincidental, isn't it? That the day we have multiple encounters with this guy who goes out of his way to get close to us, we also have an almost intruder encounter. Plus there were too many details that didn't add up to us, having overly excited imaginations. We both saw headlights, the motion detector on the porch turned on, the storm door opened and stayed open until Samson jumped up to look out of the door's window. It's a very noisy door and makes sounds when opening and closing. We heard footsteps, and Kira saw someone. And the dogs don't run up to the door like that and bark their heads off if no one is there. I don't know if whoever was at our house was the same guy that ran into us at the park. I don't know if the reason he cut in front of us as close as he did was to test how our dogs would react to him, and them not caring at all, or the first time wagging their tails convinced him that they weren't a threat. I don't know if he was in the car that inched behind us and stopped when we stopped. I don't know what would have happened if Calvin didn't have a scary manic bark, or if Samson wasn't tall enough to look out the high windows on the door. I don't know much of anything, but what I do know is this. If you're out and about minding your own business and a stranger is taking a lot of notice of you, following you, frequently running into you, or whatever, just trust your gut. Don't drive or walk straight home. Meander. Get to a public space, or even just take your time. Pay attention to your surroundings. You never know who is watching you. This happened a few years ago. I was walking my dog like I always did. We lived in a small town where nothing ever happened and most people would be inside past 7 p.m. I used to walk my dog every evening around 6 p.m., so not many people were out and I always walked that way every day. I usually went with my mom, but that night I went by myself because my mom was busy. I was walking by the main road and the other side of the path was a shop. My dog decided to do a poop on the ground right outside the shop. Being embarrassed, I picked it up and I saw a silver car pull up and stop outside the shop. At first I thought it was someone stopping in to go to the store. I picked up after my dog and I stood up straight and I was about to continue walking when the man in the car rolled down his window and said hi to me. I could hear that he wasn't English and thought that he must be on holiday and needed directions. In the passenger seat was another man holding a notepad and pen, and in the back was a dog cage. I said hi back and he asked where a certain hotel was. I told him where and he thanked me. When I was about to walk away, he said how much for the dog. I stopped and looked at him, confused, and he said again, how much for the dog? I told him that she wasn't for sale and noticed the man in the passenger seat was writing something in his notebook. The man laughed and said that he loves dogs, and then asked, how much for you then? I said that I'm also not for sale and laughed awkwardly, and again the man in the passenger seat wrote something down in his notebook. He laughed back and I said I had to go and started to walk fast back home. When I turned around the corner, I looked behind me and saw that the car was following me. I didn't want to go home because then they wouldn't know where my house is, so I went down an alley where a car wouldn't be able to go down and I was able to lose the car. About a year after that, I was in a Zoom call and a boy that is from another town not far from mine, and a few other people and a teacher. We were telling each other weird things that have happened to us, and the boy said he was walking his dog and a silver car pulled up next to him and was asking weird questions about his dog, then asked if he had any sisters for sale. I told him what happened to me and we knew it was the same man immediately. He also said there was a man with a notepad in the passenger seat and a cage in the back. What made me want to share this story here is because a few months ago, this year, my mom's friend said that her friend was walking her dog and a man in a silver car asked to buy her dog and her and followed her, and she went to her brother's house, and when he came outside, the car drove off. I-14 female was walking my dog Stella around my neighborhood. I've been at a craft fair all day and I was super tired because it had been raining and I hadn't made much money. I was asked to walk Stella just after I'd gotten back with my mom and I said yes. So we head out. I'm strolling along watching the sky because it's looking like it's going to pour and I don't have a raincoat on, just an oversized hoodie. I hear a car turn down the street that I'm walking on with Stella, and I don't think much of it. But it gets close to me and slows down. I assume it's going to turn into a driveway, but I look back, just to be cautious. The car, I believe, it was a Chevrolet, but I know it's not. It's just one of those car brands with the name on it spelled out on the front. I just do not remember the name of the brand. It has no front license plate. And this is illegal in Canada. In Canada, you must have both front and back license plates. Though if your car's from the US, you're all good. The car doesn't turn into a driveway. I'm a little bit more unsettled now. I hear it getting closer and closer to me, so I pull Stella to the other side of me, off of the road. I'm even more frightened when I hear one of the doors on the car open, as it is driving. I mutter to myself, "Oh shit, here we go. I better be able to scream well." A hand grabs my wrist and jerks me towards the car, and I wrestle with the guy for a couple of seconds, and then I scream. I have not screamed in quite a while. I'm a quiet kid, unless I'm with my friends. The dude jerks his arm again. Stella, being the silly dog she is, finally clues in that I'm in danger. She pounces at the guy, grabbing onto his leg with her jaws and making him scream like a girl. One thing to note is that Stella is a part terrier. Terriers are rat killers, so when they grab onto something, they're not letting go. The guy has loosened his grip on me by now, and I seize the opportunity and I kick him hard enough to make him drop from where he was standing. He shrieks and lets go of me, which makes Stella let go of his leg. I grabbed her and we sprinted all the way back to my house. I was able to catch the license plate. I don't remember it now, and it was from New Brunswick. I'm in British Columbia. I'm scared to think how far the two men would have gotten with me if Stella hadn't been with me. I am a female, and I would like to tell you about an experience that I had with my dog at the time. English is not my first language, so I apologize in advance for any mistakes. It's been about 11 years. It was autumn and night, and I decided to take a little walk around our housing estate with my dog, Sunny. Sunny is a black and big Labrador mix. She is really good and cuddly, but she hates other female dogs. She also has a strong protective instinct and always snarls when she doesn't know or doesn't like something or someone. There were no street lights inside the settlement. The only lighting was always at the house entrances. There was a small park with small playgrounds between the rows of houses, but as already mentioned, everything was in complete darkness. That's why Sunny was not to be seen, only to be heard while she was chasing a rabbit into the bushes. Then it goes without saying that she wasn't on a leash. I really only need this when other dogs are nearby. Sunny listens to my word and always comes when I call her. So while I strolled comfortably through the dark settlement and froze my ass off, Sunny ran happily through the area in the bushes. I always only guessed where she was because I could not see her, could only hear her from time to time. At some point, I noticed a small shadow that was whizzing around me. When I looked more closely, I could see Sunny. She started to run in large circles around me, in the place where I was, and I thought she was chasing something. But the circles that she drew grew smaller and smaller. She didn't make any noise, and I went on comfortably, because I thought she was having her zoomies. At some point, I didn't see her anymore, but I went on knowing that she would follow. Then I heard a sound. Footsteps. But they weren't my own. I was startled because they were so close behind me so suddenly. So I turned around, but I couldn't see anything thanks to the darkness. I got nervous and called for Sunny because it could have been someone with a dog. But Sunny didn't come, and I started to panic. She suddenly stood in front of me out of nowhere and began to growl as violently as she has never done before. My blood froze because it couldn't be a good thing. And then she started walking straight ahead, growling. About 2 or 3 meters, stopped, and at that moment, I recognized a figure, completely in black. This person was shocked in front of Sunny and didn't move, and Sunny started barking like there was no tomorrow. The person slowly walked backwards towards the lighted house entrances, and then I saw Sunny, bare teeth, in front of a young man, wearing a hooded sweater, and probably started to experience the same fears as I did when I noticed him, because as close as he had snuck up on me, he couldn't have had any good in mind. Since it was too dark, however, he could not see Sunny, and she must have surprised him at that right moment. Sunny started to jump, and at that moment, the guy let out a scream, and you could hear something falling from his hand on the floor. He ran, and my dog followed. After I had released myself from my shocked stiffness, I called out to my dog as loud as I could, until after a short time, she was standing in front of me again, just wagging her tail. I took her on the leash and went to where the guy had dropped something, and indeed, There was an arm-thick branch on the floor that he certainly didn't have with him to throw sticks. At home, it gradually dawned on me that my dog did not have her zoomies when she circled around me, but that she had long since noticed and kept an eye on this piece of shit to protect me. On the one hand, that was creepy, but also a relief. I was and still am so grateful for my great dog. I was walking my dog tonight because he was in my room a lot of today while I caught up on my homework. Halfway through my walk, I decided to go another way because I was holding a bag of dog shit. I knew where a trash can would be. Let me note, I live in a slightly okay part of a pretty bad neighborhood, but I'm fairly strong, and not to mention my crazy German Shepherd, Caesar. Now let me say, Caesar hates strangers right now, but usually doesn't bark or anything while walking next to people. Anyways, as we continue down the sidewalk and down the bend, I notice a man, and immediately my dog stares at him. So do I. And there was something just wrong. He was walking the same direction as us, but as I turned down the street, he turned around in such a creepy way. Kind of like the old lady in the It Chapter 2 film, where the old lady is first seen as it turns around. He started walking towards me, but was still far. But then he's taking very strange, accentuated steps. Unusually long ones at that. When I got close, I saw his creepy dead eyes and smile. His skin was dark and smooth, and he stared at me so creepily. I still managed to say, "What's up, man?" And I got no reply. Maybe he hadn't heard me. The closer I got, I wondered why he was walking so strange beforehand. It didn't even seem possible to do so consistently. And he looked sober and blank, but was walking normal and fast now. We were getting closer, and he started with those steps again. My dog snarled and lunged at him, biting at the air. This dude didn't even flinch, and he just kept walking with those weird steps. Now, I rarely get scared of strangers, with or without my dog. I've dealt with very mentally unsound people, drug traffickers, and very scary people. I'm good at fighting, and seldom do I get scared of strangers, like I said, but I got the damn chills, and I was just so creeped out. I don't want to say if it was a demon or whatever, but I just don't know. I saw a bat a few minutes later, and yesterday I woke up, seeing a tall shadow in my bed. I really don't think these things are related, obviously, or at least I hope not, but I'm just freaked out. A lot of weird things have been happening lately. I'm a strong skeptic and haven't experienced anything paranormal in a long while. Any guesses or help? The way he turned around and the way he walked and looked at me. Also, my dog going for his throat is just, ugh. I dog sit for a family friend. They much prefer to have someone stay at the house with the dogs. I grew up in a town in the middle of nowhere, and I love the countryside, so for me it's like a staycation, because I live in the city now and never have any time to myself. Anyway, their house is out in the middle of nowhere. When I say nowhere, I mean this place takes 2 hours to get to from my work, and it's about 45 minutes to the nearest town and interstate. There is one neighbor within 5 miles, and he lives directly across the street. I'm used to this where I'm from. It's supposed to give you the space you need, but also help you feel safe, knowing that you have at least one person nearby. However, this guy has done nothing but make me feel unsafe as hell. So I get to Terry and Johnny's house, and they're telling me the drill. When to feed the dogs, water plants, etc. 2 super cute spoiled Australian cattle dogs. Then as they're loading up their stuff to take it to the car, Terry says, "Oh, don't forget to tell her about Steve," John says. "Oh yeah, don't worry about the neighbor across the street. He's harmless. The guy drinks a lot and is a little off, but totally harmless. Hell, the guy has lost his license so many times all he can do is drive a moped to get to town." Chuckles and then stops smiling. However, just in case, this is where we keep the gun. Steve has 3 "Don't Tread on Me" Confederate flags and 2 plain Confederate flags, all of which are hanging from his porch. Of course he's a little weird. He then takes me to his gun and explains that it's loaded, and if I were to use it, I don't need to cock it. Just pull the trigger extra hard. At this point, I'm like, whatever, you keep a gun in your house when it takes police at least 45 minutes to get to your home. Still, I've got no worries. I'm used to drunk weirdos. I know how to handle them. I love this life in the middle of nowhere, and I've got 2 protective dogs that will attack on a 1-word command, so I'm feeling pretty safe. Terry and Johnny leave around 3 p.m. and I took the dogs for a walk and I play some frisbee and begin to unload my stuff with them, while they're still worn out from all the running. As I come back out of my second load of stuff, I'm staying there for a week and I need work clothes and my Xbox to keep me entertained in the late evenings. I hear the neighbor, Steve, slam his door and seemingly having a phone conversation. I first just hear his voice faintly, then he yells, "Where did you go?" The dogs are hearing him now and starting to growl softly. I say, "Calm down, boys, it's alright. Just Steve, remember? He probably wants some privacy. Let's go inside." As I grab my stuff, I hear him yell again, "I do care about my kids. Screw you." Then I hear him throw something on the unpaved road behind me. Turns out to be his cell phone. As I'm grabbing my stuff, the dogs start going crazy and run a few feet behind me, barking and growling viciously. I drop my stuff and turn around to see the neighbor at the end of the driveway, probably 50 to 75 feet, just staring at me. I yell at the dogs to calm down and to get back at my side, and they do. I give a friendly wave to Steve. In my head I'm thinking, this is kind of weird, but he's probably been drinking. Plus, they said the guy is harmless, and I've dog sat before and never had a problem with neighbors. He then takes a single step forward and says in a manipulative sounding voice, "You alright?" Steve is wearing dirty jeans, work boots, a dirty red hoodie, and a red hat with a Confederate flag on it. He's also got brown dirty hair to his shoulders and a beard that's probably 5 inches long. "Yeah, I'm pretty good. My name is Pip. Just dog sitting for Johnny and Terry this week and ready to get in and call it an evening with the boys." I then look down at the dogs to see their reaction. They look like they're about to attack, and I've never seen them like this before. "How about yourself?" We sat in silence for about 30 seconds before he stated, "I'm asking if you're alright." "I'm Steve." "Nice to meet you, Steve. Thanks for being a good neighbor and checking, but like I said, I'm good. Are you alright?" Again, silence. Now this silence lasts for probably a whole minute, and I figure that he's probably wasted. I should just get inside with my shit. So I turn around and finish grabbing my stuff, and as I do, I hear him take one more step on the gravel driveway, and the dogs bark again. I turn around and Steve says, "I know them. Them dogs won't do nothing to me." There are some darn good dogs, that's for sure. I begin feeling super uneasy. So I close my trunk and turn around to see if he's going to say anything else. I was about to tell him that I was going inside, and then instead awkwardly say, "Yeah, he cut me off." "Yeah, what?" he yelled. I'm shocked and say, "Yeah, I'm going inside now. Thanks for checking, Steve. I'm fine. I've got the dogs this week. Have a good night." I turn and go, and the dogs follow me with no problem. But Steve continues to stand where I left him for literally like 10 minutes, just staring at the house. Note that this house does not have a front door. There is a side door and a back door. The back door is the main door because the front of the house has one of those big green fluffy privacy trees. So I can't even see his house through the front window. You can't see either doors from the street. You have to come onto the property to see them. It's about 6 o'clock, and where I'm at, the sun starts going down around then, but doesn't actually get dark until around 9:15 during summer. Anyways, the dogs and I are out on the couch, and I've got my gaming headphones on while playing Red Dead 2 online. All of a sudden, the dogs flip their shit, running towards the back door, barking and growling. I'm like, what the heck? They don't do that unless someone pulls up in their car, and they don't know who it is. I'm not having anyone over, so I grab my knife, which is always close by, and I start walking towards the back door. The dogs are still going crazy, and I have no idea what they're looking at. I don't see anything, but then I look closer. I see moped taillights in the driveway, seemingly hiding behind my car. I then try and focus and see that Steve is turned around, staring at the back of the house from his moped, ducking behind my car. I get the dogs to be quiet, and I hide to see what he is doing. The dogs are still growling, but at least they're not giving away my location right now. I watch him for 5 minutes. No movement. Just a creepy stare in my general direction. I don't think that he can see me, but I'm not so sure. He then shuts off his moped and crouches next to my car, where I can see him now peeking into my car windows. When I lived in the country, I never locked any doors. Not my house, not my car, nothing. Since I work and live downtown, I actually keep all of the doors locked at all time. I don't see him try to get into it, but he walks around it a few times. He's not crouching anymore. Obviously, he feels like no one is watching him or gives a shit that he's looking into my car, but he's only taking a single step. stopping, looking in my car, then at the house. Repeat, a single step at a time. Creepy as shit. At this point, I text Terry and tell her that Steve is doing some weird shit, and I tell her I'm starting to feel uncomfortable. I get a text back reading, call the cops if you feel unsafe. They know him. They can come talk to him. Remind me to tell you about the time that he was standing out by the tree at 6 a.m. when I was leaving for work. When we get back. I think he had a psychotic break. How comforting, right? So I talk myself down some. This guy is just wasted. However, if he starts getting close to the door, I'm calling the cops. Dumb idea looking back because the cops take so long to get out there. I'm watching him as he's made his second round looking into my car. He then gets on his moped and drives off. As he passes the window that faces the driveway, he sped up, trying to make it so I wouldn't see him if I were just watching TV. Now it's like 8 p.m. and the dogs start going crazy again. I look out and now his moped is parked in plain view and he is standing on the walkway, just 30 feet from the house, staring and talking to himself. I had previously turned all the lights off so that he couldn't easily see in and see what I was doing. I see him take a single step towards the door, probably about 30 feet away. I grab the gun and I've calmed the dogs down and they are in full-on protective mode. One dog to my left and one to my right. It's around 8:15 p.m. now and I call the police. I explain the situation as the owners think that he had a psychotic break. As I'm halfway through explaining why I'm starting to fear for my safety, the operator says, "Ma'am, what is your address again?" I tell her, "I'll have to transfer you to blank blank county." "Are you serious?" The owner said that the cops in South Blank County know him very well and know how to handle him. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but you're not located in our county." The operator then transfers me to another county. When she answers the phone with the average 911, "What's your emergency?" I'm silent. I'm looking out the kitchen window and Steve has come out about 4 to 5 feet. 911, "What's your emergency?" I then explain what's happening and explain that I was transferred because I'm apparently not in their jurisdiction. She then tells me to remain calm and to turn on all the lights. I said screw that. This guy is waiting for me to do something like that. The doors are locked and I do have a firearm. If he enters, I will shoot. She then tells me that it is safest with the lights on. I turn on the lights. He notices, turns and gets on his moped and drives back to his house. I tell her what happened. She asks if I would still like to have an officer come out. I said hell yes, I want an officer to come out. Apparently the cops in South Blank County know him, but she transferred me to you. This is the third time he's come onto this property tonight, and he's getting closer and closer to the door every time. I do not feel safe. Someone that is not me needs to talk to this guy. Calm down, ma'am. We will send somebody out. However, based on where you are located, it will take a while for one to get out there. That's fine, I said. I just want someone out here. Thank you. I asked her if she would stay on the line until someone got there or no. And she said that a police officer is on their way, but she needs to be available if anyone else calls in. She told me if he comes back and I'm still uneasy, to call them without hesitation. Now it's about 9 p.m. and the sun is getting ready to set completely. Again, the dogs go crazy. Now I'm getting real pissed off and I'm walking around the house with a loaded gun so that if Steve sees me, he sees that I have a gun too. I look out the window and I see his moped, but I don't see him. Where the hell is he? From the window in the kitchen, I can't see the back door. So I go upstairs. One dog follows and the other is too old to climb stairs, and I peek down through the bathroom window. Steve is on the back porch, lighting matches and throwing them down on the wooden porch. He doesn't seem harmless anymore. He's talking to himself and twisting his head back and forth, like he's getting warmed up to fight or having a conversation with another one of his personalities or something. I start filming him from the upstairs window, just in case I die. You know? So that I could hide my phone, and when they found it, they'd know it had to be this guy. The sun is down and it's starting to get dark. He steps up to the door and starts knocking. He then starts pounding on the door. I'm pretty good at staying calm in situations, but my heart started beating so fast that my Fitbit had to manage my heart rate tab every 2 seconds. If he gets in here, I'm going to have to kill this guy, or he's going to kill me. I could see pure hate in his eyes. Then he stops pounding at the door, quickly turns away and runs to his moped, starts it and takes off faster than I thought a moped could even go. Not even a minute later, the cop pulls into their driveway. I had mentioned to the dispatch operator that I have 2 dogs who will bark at the officer but will not attack, unless given a specific word. They are trained and I do have a firearm. I will leave the firearm inside when I go to meet the officer. I met the police officer and the dogs didn't growl, simply gave a single bark, a piece to let me know that someone was here. I went outside to meet him and I told him that the guy just took off on a moped. He says, "Oh yeah, I think I just passed him when I turned onto the road." I explained that he is absolutely drunk or crazy, and if he sees him on his way back, that he should definitely pull him over, because I'm quite positive he's under the influence of something. Normal people just don't act that way. The cop basically shrugs everything off and says, "Well, are you going to stay the night here?" I told him no. I will leave the dogs overnight and come back in the morning. I asked him to stay while I packed up everything, and he nodded. I go inside, and I give the dogs love and treats, and I crate them for the night. I take off and return the next day with my dad. My dad begins walking the perimeter to try and show him that a man is also staying here. I'm a 24-year-old female, if you're wondering. Then Steve, wearing the same dirty outfit and hat, while holding a 24 case of Budweiser, is standing at the end of the driveway again. I'm watching him from the front window. I see my dad at the other end of the yard. As he comes into view, Steve turns around and walks back to his house. I later learned that Steve has been to jail multiple times due to domestic abuse. His kids are not allowed to see him due to his violent nature, and he bought a four-wheeler. No one knows how he gets money to get these things. Terry and Johnny have never seen him leave for work. They've only seen him leave on his moped or four-wheeler empty-handed for an hour or two and return with a case or two of beer. I don't know who he thought I was, but every time he looked at the house in my direction, there was just pure hate in his eyes. Who knows what would have happened if I hadn't called the cops as early as I did.